In this video, I'm going to discuss the evaluation of Bowlby and his 44 Thieves study and the impact Bowlby's theories have had on the British education and early years systems. If you want further information on all of Bowlby's main theories, then watch my last video. There'll be a link in the description. So firstly, let's talk about the 44 Thieves study. The supporting evidence that Bowlby 1944 provided was in the form of clinical interviews and retrospective data. This meant that Bowlby was asking the participants to look back and recall separations, therefore these memories may not be accurate. Also, Bowlby designed and conducted the experiment himself, which may have led to experimental bias, particularly as he was responsible for making the diagnosis of affectionless psychopathy. He knew whether the children were in the theft group or the control group. Consequently, his findings may have unconsciously influenced his own expectations. This potentially undermines the findings' validity. Another criticism of the 44 Thieves study was that it concluded affectionless psychopathy was caused by maternal deprivation. This is correlation data, and so only shows that a relationship between the two variables exists, and not that one causes the other. This evaluation was pointed out by Rutter, 1972, who noted that Bowlby's conclusions were flawed due to confusing correlation with causation. Rutter suggested there may have been many other external variables other than the disruption of the attachment bond, such as family conflict, parental income, education, etc., that may have affected the behaviour of the 44 Thieves. However, positively speaking, the case study gathered a lot of detail, both qualitative and quantitative, so the data was in-depth, therefore increasing validity. Also, Bowlby included the use of a control group of the same size from the same clinic to match the juvenile thieves. Including this comparison enabled Bowlby to conclude that the affectionless psychopathic character could be linked to stealing. If you're watching this video because you take A-level psychology, then these evaluation points are nice simple ones to remember, because depending on your exam board you may be specifically asked for a strength or a weakness of the study. Moving on now to discuss the evaluation of Bowlby's theories as a whole. Bowlby's theories were very revolutionary, and from them grew many opinions surrounding the topic of the psychology of attachment. Naturally, many psychologists who learnt of Bowlby tested his theories in their own research, and we now have a collection of researchers who agree and disagree with John Bowlby. Bowlby's ideas had a great influence on the way researchers thought about attachment, and much of the discussion of his theory had a focus on his belief in monotropy. Although Bowlby may not dispute that young children form multiple attachments, he still contends that the attachment to the mother is unique, in that it is the first to appear and remains the strongest of all. However, on both of these counts, the evidence seems to suggest otherwise. Schaffer and Emerson, 1964, noted that specific attachments started at about 8 months old, and very shortly thereafter, the infants became attached to other people. By 18 months, very few were attached to only one person, some had 5 or more attachments. The main psychologist who challenged Bowlby's theories was Michael Rutter. Rutter, 1972, wrote a book called Maternal Deprivation Reassessed. In the book, he suggested that Bowlby may have oversimplified the concept of maternal deprivation. Rutter pointed out that several indicators of attachment, such as protest or distress when an attached person leaves, have been shown for a variety of attachment figures, for example fathers, siblings, peers, or even inanimate objects. Critics such as Rutter have also accused Bowlby of not distinguishing between deprivation and privation. Rutter argued that if a child fails to develop an emotional bond completely, this is privation, whereas deprivation refers to the loss of or a damage to an attachment. Bowlby used the term maternal deprivation to refer to separation from an attached figure, loss of an attached figure, and failure to develop an attachment to any figure. Rutter suggested that these each have different effects. From his survey of research on privation, Rutter proposed that it is likely to lead initially to clingy dependent behaviour, attention-seeking, and indiscriminate friendliness. Then, as the child matures, an inability to keep rules, form lasting relationships, or feel guilt. He also found evidence of antisocial behaviour, affectionless psychopathy, and disorders of language, intellectual development, and physical growth. Rutter argued that these problems are not due solely to the lack of attachment to a mother figure, as Bowlby claimed, but to factors such as the lack of intellectual stimulation and social experiences which attachments normally provide. In addition, such problems can be overcome later in the child's development with the right kind of care. Many of the 44 thieves in Bowlby's study had been moved around a lot during childhood and had probably never formed an attachment. This suggested that they were suffering from privation rather than deprivation, which Rutter suggested was far more harmful to children. This led to a very important study on the long-term effects of privation carried out by Hodges and Tizard in 1989. Bowlby's maternal deprivation is, however, supported by Harlow's 1958 research with monkeys. He showed that monkeys reared in isolation from their mothers suffered emotional and social problems in older age. The monkeys never formed an attachment, which is privation, and as such grew up to be aggressive and had problems interacting with other monkeys. Bowlby assumed that physical separation on its own could lead to deprivation, but Rutter, 1972, argues that it is the disruption of the attachment rather than the physical separation, therefore suggesting that emotional separation could do just as much damage. This is supported by Radke Yarrow, 1985, who found that 52% of children whose mothers suffered from depression were insecurely attached. This figure raised to 80% when this occurred in a context of poverty. This shows the influence of social factors. Bowlby did not take into account the quality of substitute care. For example, how were the 44 thieves being cared for at the clinic or currently by their parents? Deprivation can be avoided if there is good emotional care after the separation. Moving on now to discuss the implications of Bowlby's theories. Speaking solely from experience, this section can be relevant for anyone studying psychology or childcare. Bowlby's theories had a huge impact, not only on professional childcare but also on societal child-rearing expectations. Bowlby once said that a mother's love is as important for children's psychological health as vitamins are for physical health. His theories put a lot of emphasis on the mother and a lot of blame too if anything were to go wrong. The view and the attachment theory that grew from it has had a tremendous influence on childcare practices. For example, it's impacted on the provision of alternative care for children and the development of key worker schemes in daycare, children's homes and foster care, advice and care given to expectant and new parents, and decisions made in court and probation services about youth offending and parental responsibility. Bowlby's influence is recognised even among people who have never heard of him, such as beliefs about whether young children are best brought up by their own parents and opinions about which age children are ready to start school. Bowlby's attachment theory states that close relationships between humans are biologically necessary and governed by primitive mechanisms shared by other mammals. For healthy psychological development, Bowlby claimed a special relationship is needed between babies and carers. Through being cared for, babies learn how to care for themselves and others. By 12 months, children have begun to build crude internal working models. These models shape ideas about what to expect from other people, how to treat them, and how to understand them. Children with experiences of carers who are sensitive, responsive, and predictably available are likely to have models that anticipate enjoyment of social interaction. They tend to feel secure and valued, and can therefore value others and cooperate. Children with experiences of neglect or of inconsistent or rejecting attachment figures have different outlooks. Some avoidant children may appear not to want close relationships, and some ambivalent children may seem more conflicted, anxious, and clingy. Bowlby proposed that with optimal care, every child could learn to feel valued. He thought this would decrease the likelihood of stress-related mental illnesses, as well as social problems such as delinquency, criminality, or addiction. But Bowlby recognised that many parents, especially those with histories of poor care, would need help to give their children this security, due to their own internal working models. Therefore, Bowlby's theories can be seen in services used today, such as new parents being assigned a health visitor to help them if they're struggling. Attachment theory has always been controversial. Nowadays, there are several different interpretations of it. Determinists maintain that the early years are critical for all later development. They argue that if babies do not have sensitive, well-attuned maternal care until they are at least 2, they will develop such poor attachments that their later development will be at risk. Constructivists tend to view development as more flexible. Although it might be advantageous to have consistently good care, later experiences of good relationships can remedy earlier poor experiences. Both approaches, though, share Bowlby's conviction that throughout life, the experience of positive relationships is of immense importance. If you're studying childcare, you may be asked questions about the importance of forming positive attachments, or what your role as a practitioner would be regarding the encouragement of a positive attachment between your key child and their parents. This is where Bowlby's theories would come into play. Some food for thought regarding Bowlby's claims. How may his theories relate to or have an effect on working mothers, single fathers, same-sex parents, or children who have been rehomed? If you want me to make a video going into more detail about any of the other researchers I've mentioned in this video, then let me know down in the comments. In my next video, I'm going to be explaining Mary Ainsworth's theory of attachment and talking you through her strange situation experiment. Thanks for watching, bye!